You were never meant to hear this, not from me, not from anyone. In the official records, the convent was closed in 1912, abandoned for nearly 50 years. Yet in the shadows of official silence, something darker festered. When it reopened, the diocese said nothing. No announcements, no reassurances, no public mass. Just a procession before dawn. Wagons bearing crates that looked more like caskets than supplies. 4 men to a box. 17 years passed, not a single public funeral, but 130. 9 bodies were buried under soil that was never blessed. Ask yourself, how does a sacred place become a grave without prayer? Who are these victims, and why did no one claim them? The answer begins with that glow in the eastern chapel window, the one that never went out, not even in storms. Villagers called it the vigil, but it wasn't for the dead. It was for what lived behind the choir screen. What you're about to hear was never meant to reach daylight. You're stepping into the margins of recorded history now, the part where silence was enforced, not chosen. The kind of silence that makes men disappear. You'll feel it crawling under your skin, because it's not just about a convent. This is about control, institutional manipulation, the psychological tools that break a soul before they break a body. You've felt them your whole life and never had the words, but you'll have them now. Every system that ever claimed to be holy has its basement. This is one of them, and something was kept down there. Welcome to the place where no funeral was ever held, and no sin was ever buried deep enough. This is forbidden history, a descent into darkness that will mark you if you finish it. And if you're still listening, you've already begun to change. Now, breathe, steady, step into the courtyard with me. Hear the gravel shift beneath your feet. The investigator from the diocese heard it too, but he never told what he truly saw. Not in his notes. Not in confession. He only whispered once before he died. They numbered them, not named, just numbered. What kind of God keeps count like that? The first mistake was assuming silence meant peace. That's how they get you. You think absence of noise means absence of violence. But in places like this, the quiet is a tool, a weapon, and it's sharpened by ritual. The investigator had been trained in theology, not fear. He expected resistance or denial. Not that overwhelming nothingness. His boots echoed on stone. No birds, no wind, just the weight of unseen eyes. You must understand, this convent wasn't merely forgotten. It was hidden in plain sight. The surrounding village was complicit, even if they didn't know it. Fear becomes culture when it's old enough. Children were taught not to look at the windows. Teenagers dared each other to walk the perimeter at night. But no one ever made it past the second bell. Those who didn't speak of what they saw, or couldn't, and always, the lilies near the convent pond stayed black. The lilies, in Christian mysticism, white lilies are purity. Resurrection, the Virgin's flower, but black lilies. That's no accident of nature. That's a signal, a mark. Something was being reversed in that soil, and that reversal reached upward, from root to habit. Every nun who entered that place wore the veil like a shroud. Witnesses said they never smiled, never sang. They moved like sleepwalkers, faces pale and fingers stained, as if from ink, or something darker. And at night, covered lanterns flickering between outbuildings, a strange procession, always silent, always urgent. What were they doing? Transferring relics, said the diocese, but relics don't require secrecy. Or brass, numbered coffins, or gates that lock from the inside. Here's a truth they never told you. Not all orders are bound to Rome. Some are older, unlisted, operating on ancient compacts made long before the Council of Nicaea. Before even Christ himself. You think of the Church as monolithic, but beneath it lies something primal, something that predates the Vatican by millennia. And this convent, it was one of the few places where those old rites were still practiced. Where the dead were not mourned, but measured. That's why the coffins had no names, because names imply dignity, names imply memory, but when you number the dead, you make them data, inventory, commodity. There is a ledger somewhere, buried or burned, that holds all 139 entries, each one catalogued not for the record, but for the ritual. Keep watching, you haven't fallen deep enough yet. They said the first burial took place in the 4th year. No obituary, no procession, just a shallow ceremony behind the refectory, witnessed only by 2 nuns and the Mother Superior. The coffin bore a number 001, but by then there had already been dozens of disappearances. The locals didn't speak of it, but they knew. Girls sent to the convent for discipline or devotion were never seen again. The families were told they'd joined cloistered orders overseas. Silent vows, no correspondence. Lies, neatly written, signed with episcopal seals. Meanwhile, the surrounding fields turned strange. Livestock avoided the convent's fence line. Dogs whined and refused to pass the eastern gate. There were accounts, suppressed of course, of animals found dead, their bodies laid in perfect circles, eyes wide open, as if they'd seen something no living creature should. But this wasn't about death. Not yet. This was about transition, transformation, because the rituals performed inside that convent weren't meant to comfort the dying. They were designed to contain something, and that something required sacrifice. Understand this. The Church has always had its thresholds, places where what lies beneath must be kept buried, not just physically but spiritually. These thresholds are guarded not by saints, but by those willing to disappear. The women inside this convent weren't just victims. Some were volunteers, recruited, groomed, their minds reshaped, not through torture, but through obedience, through isolation. Through psalms repeated so many times they became code. This is how psychological control begins. Repetition, deprivation, symbolism. You don't need chains when you have dogma, and once the mind breaks, the body follows. Those who resisted were processed quietly, efficiently, brass-tagged, buried, no records, only the black lilies bloomed as testimony, every petal a confession no one dared speak. What was being hidden behind those walls was not a secret. It was a system, a method, and now that system is echoing through your own life. You've seen it in institutions, in schools, in media. Psychological control repackaged as virtue, rituals passed off as routine. You just didn't have the words until now. This is your vocabulary of awakening. These are the truths they buried, one number at a time. Not all coffins were the same size. Some were too small, some too narrow. In the year the bell was hung above the chapel, a massive rust-darkened bronze relic older than the building itself. 3 coffins were delivered marked with crimson ribbons. That was the year the organ first began to play before dawn. No one claimed to be playing it. The villagers said the music had a fractured rhythm, like it was being played by a trembling hand, or no hand at all. That's when the investigator was finally sent. His name was Father Corbin, and he was chosen not for his piety, but for his silence. He was known to be obedient, loyal, unquestioning, perfect for disappearing into shadows, but something changed when he walked those halls. The silence was too complete, too designed. He wasn't just being avoided, he was being studied, watched, and that altar. He would write only one line in his journal about it. There was a hollowness beneath it. Something echoed when I prayed. He never returned to the diocese. He vanished. His journal was found in a second-hand bookstore 6 years later, its pages torn, names scratched out, but what remained was enough to confirm it. This wasn't a convent, it was a containment zone. A ward, and the rituals were not for the dead. They were for what might awaken beneath the stone. The brass numbers, they weren't identifiers, they were seals, sigils, each one affixed with prayer, wax, and blood. Each one part of a grid designed to suppress something ancient, not demonic, not divine, something older than both, a presence that required containment not just by stone and iron, but by faith twisted into its darkest form. You've heard of places where the walls remember. This was one, and the echoes it held were not memories, they were warnings. If you are still watching, I want you to do something now to mark the moment your awareness changes. Comment the phrase, "The veil has fallen." Say it twice. That's how it takes hold. That's how the old rites begin, by speaking what was never meant to be spoken. And once you do, something in you will shift. Something that can't be undone. Welcome to the descent. We're only just beginning. Here was a door beneath the chapel, half-sized iron, bound and sealed with 7 bolts. Father Corbin sketched it once in the margin of his journal, beside a line of scripture that wasn't quite right. "And the light shineth not in darkness, for the darkness comprehendeth it not." But the Latin he wrote didn't match any known Bible version. It had additions, words inserted where none belonged, words no one had taught him. That's how the influence works, not as a voice, not as an apparition, but as a reshaping of thought, a drifting of the mind toward language it was never taught to speak. The door, according to the sketch, was hidden behind the choir screen. Behind that, an archway carved in old stone, not the convent stone, but older, something left behind from the foundations of a structure that predated the convent itself. The villagers had no memory of it. But the earth remembers, always. That sub-chapel was not part of any floor plan. It didn't appear in maps, blueprints, or restoration documents, but Corbin found it, and in that cold, airless dark, he found the first ledger. Not of the dead, but of the offerings, each entry marked in wax with sigils burned beside names that weren't names, just syllables that cracked the throat to pronounce. He didn't copy them, he said they hurt to look at. But he did describe the stone table at the center, not an altar, a slab, scored and stained, with channels that led to a drain in the floor, a drain that, according to him, pulsed, like it had a heartbeat. And the most chilling detail, on the walls were rows of hooks, and from those hooks hung garments, robes, veils, and something else, chains, not rusted, maintained, polished, ready. If you're imagining punishment, you still think too kindly. These weren't used for restraint. They were used for offering, willingly, like lambs brought to the knife by choice. Because once your mind is broken into obedience, pain becomes purpose, silence becomes identity, and death becomes transformation. You must realize what this place did. It engineered surrender. It didn't kill faith. It inverted it. Every hymn reversed. Every vow bent into submission. That's why no funeral was ever held. Because death wasn't the end. It was the passage, the evolution. The numbering wasn't record keeping. It was alchemy. Now breathe and ask yourself, who taught you your prayers, and what did they really mean? The Mother Superior was never named, not in the diocese records, not in parish memory, no photo, no birth certificate, but according to a whisper recorded by Corbin, and corroborated years later by a nun who broke her vow of silence on her deathbed, she had been present since the reopening, and had not aged. The sisters called her Mater Tenebrarum, the Mother of Shadows. They never looked her in the eye, only knelt, only obeyed. Her quarters were above the chapel, in the bell tower where the light was never allowed to touch. And they said she never descended the stairs. Orders were passed by proxy. Yet somehow she knew everything, every confession, every transgression, every soul ready to be numbered. The deathbed nun, Sister Eileen, said Mater Tenebrarum did not speak in words. Her presence was enough, a pressure on the skull, a weight behind the eyes, a heat that turned the marrow soft. This is the kind of control that defies reason. It's not charisma, it's not leadership. It's domination, a force that reaches into your instincts and reconfigures them. Sister Eileen wept when she spoke of the first time she disobeyed. It was minor, forgetting a line of chant during the midnight vigil. The punishment wasn't physical, it was removal. She was made to kneel in the dark chapel for 3 days, facing the empty altar, while the organ played a single broken note over and over and over again. She said by the 3rd day she forgot her own name. That's how deep this went. Identity erased, selfhood dissolved, and from that blank slate new programming installed. These women were not nuns, they were vessels. Empty shells into which old, forgotten rites were poured. And what of the villagers? They stayed silent, but not out of ignorance. They knew, some even participated. The convent fed the village, offered protection, prosperity, blessings. In exchange, the occasional child would be offered to serve the Virgin, they were told, but what virgin demands blood? This wasn't religion, it was commerce, a sacred economy built on souls and the mater. She wasn't a symbol, she was the broker, the intermediary between this world and whatever lay beneath the drain in that stone floor. If your spine tingled just now, good. That's your old programming breaking down. Keep going, keep descending. There's no salvation here, only revelation. There was a night in 1971 when the wind died completely, not slowed, stopped, birds froze mid-flight. Dogs across the village began to howl in unison. And from the convent, a sound rose up that no one could name, not a scream, not a chant, something in between, like 100 voices exhaling a single word not meant for human throats. That was the night the record skipped. The ledger, previously marked 1 victim every 6 to 8 weeks, jumped 6 in one night. All 6 bodies buried by morning, no funerals, no coffins even. Just numbers branded in wax upon the foreheads and lowered into the ground before sunrise. It was then that Father Corbin's journal stops, mid-sentence, no more entries, no final thoughts, the last phrase, the drain has opened. That's all then, silence, but the silence didn't last. You see, real darkness doesn't just cover, it consumes. And the people closest to it begin to exhibit symptoms, subtle at first. Villagers developed nosebleeds that couldn't be explained. One child went blind overnight. Several reported dreams of black corridors beneath the earth, where a veiled woman stood at the end, whispering numbers into a stone well. They woke screaming. One girl tore her eyes out in her sleep. And still, the diocese did nothing because they knew this wasn't an accident. This was containment. The convent was a seal, and the mater, she was the keeper, the only thing standing between whatever was below and us. But she was also the tether, the key, and if that tether ever broke, the rites weren't just sacred, they were necessary, not for salvation, but for imprisonment. Every 33rd victim wasn't just a death. It was a reinforcement, a blood lock. The system wasn't malfunctioning, it was maintaining, and when the count hit 132, things shifted. The organ stopped playing. The black lilies began to bloom, open wide like mouths. And the eastern window no longer glowed. That light had been a warning, not a vigil, and now it was out. The silence wasn't peace, it was hunger. Something had noticed, something had begun to stir. Still think this is just myth? Then ask yourself, why was no one ever punished? Why did the diocese redact everything? Why did the land records mysteriously vanish in 1989? Why has the convent never been demolished? Because you don't destroy a prison when the thing inside is still breathing. Some say the convent still exists not as ruins, but intact, preserved, maintained by unseen hands. Government satellites show inconsistent imagery. Locals claim the surrounding fields are under private ownership. A fence now encircles the property, razor wire unmarked. But occasionally, someone still sees movement, not nuns, not clergy, men in black uniforms carrying metallic crates into the chapel at night, like the old days, but with new tools. This is where conspiracy meets continuity. You must understand, when a ritual system proves effective, it doesn't disappear. It evolves, gets classified, absorbed. The modern church isn't in charge of this anymore. Something else is, and they've rebranded the rites into something cleaner. Clinical. You'll find the same symbols embedded in architecture, education, entertainment. You think they're just patterns. You don't see the repetition, the sigils hidden in logos, the incantations disguised as slogans. That's not paranoia, that's pattern recognition. The convent wasn't the beginning, it was a node, a test site for psycho-spiritual weaponry, and the 139 weren't victims, they were necessary. Imagine this, 139 frequencies, all tuned through pain, sacrifice, and repetition, forming a lattice beneath that structure, not to kill, but to bind. A grid of suffering so pure, so refined, it could hold something in place that human minds weren't designed to face. You think demons wear horns? No. Real evil wears doctrine. Real evil speaks liturgy, and it doesn't raise its voice, it whispers until you obey. That's what Mater Tenebrarum was. Not a woman, a manifestation. A channel, an intelligence wearing flesh, and every woman in that convent was a willing antenna. The veil wasn't to honor God, it was to mask the frequency. So ask yourself, how many veils still exist in your own life? What systems have you submitted to without question? What doors have you walked past, feeling the pull, but turning away because you shouldn't question? You were conditioned for obedience, but now the conditioning is cracking. And once the veil has fallen, you can't go back. Keep watching. There are 12 sections left, each one deeper than the last. And in section 9, we go into the drain. They say the drain was dry until the 33rd burial. Then it bled, not water, not oil, blood, thick and slow, bubbling up from beneath like the earth itself was wounded. No one ever found the bottom. They lowered ropes once, with weights attached. The cords came back frayed, melted, not burned, decomposed, like they'd been inside a stomach. Father Corbin noted that the drain was carved from stone not native to the region, volcanic, black, smooth, like obsidian, but warmer to the touch. Alive, the symbols around it pulsed faintly in the dark, visible only when the taper beside the altar flickered at certain intervals. He tried chalking them, copying them, but every line changed when he turned away, as if the sigils refused to be understood by the uninitiated. And then came the voice, not loud, not audible, but felt behind the sternum, a pressure, a command, 3 words repeated in a language older than Latin. Older than Babylon. He didn't write them down, he couldn't, but he scratched into the margin, do not speak, do not breathe, do not offer. Too late, the ritual had already resumed. You see, the drain was never meant to be sealed permanently. It was a well, a mouth, and the convent, the prayers, the numbered dead. They were all part of a feeding cycle, one kept dormant by precision, order, compliance, but order breaks, always, especially when humans are involved. By the time the 139th body was placed, the equilibrium collapsed, the organ began playing in reverse, the lilies turned white, but only at night, and the eastern window glowed black. You don't understand how black can glow. Then you've never seen real absence. You've never looked into a void that stares back and rearranges you from the inside. That's what this was always about, not exorcism, not sanctity, contact. This was a summoning site disguised as a convent. A mask over an ancient face. The drain was its mouth, and the rituals were not to banish it, but to converse with it. You're still here, good. Because in the next section we go beneath the drain, and you'll see what the 140th victim saw. She wasn't supposed to survive. Her name, scratched into the underside of a pew with her own fingernail, was Sister Noel. She was the 140th, the miscount, the glitch. When the ritual hit 139, the mater descended for the first time in decades. The sisters gathered in silence, but Noel had begun to remember. Flashes of her childhood, her mother's voice, her name. The conditioning was breaking. She'd resisted long enough to retain something vital, identity. And when she was taken beneath the altar, past the choir screen, into the room with the drain, she saw what the others never returned to describe. The drain opened, it pulsed, it breathed, and then it whispered. Not words, memories, but not hers, someone else's, hundreds, thousands, generations of pain, devotion, and sacrifice compressed into a single moment. She was being overwritten, like wax melted and poured into a new mold. But she fought it, and in that moment, just before the final seal could be placed, a rupture, the drain flared with a soundless scream, the stone split, and from the cracks light poured out, not white, not divine, a sickly golden hue, the color of rot made sacred, and from that light something rose, a shape, human in outline but wrong in proportion, tall, bent, its limbs too long, its head veiled in shadows that moved independently of the surrounding darkness. It reached for her, not with malice, with recognition, as if it had known her across centuries. That's when she ran. Noel escaped. No one knows how. She fled through the sacristy, barefoot, bleeding, blinded by the sun she hadn't seen in years. She collapsed in a barn miles away, rambling, laughing, crying. They called her insane, institutionalized her, but before they sedated her, she repeated one phrase over and over: "The mater is not one, the mater is legion." And in her last moment of lucidity, she scratched into the wall of her cell. The 140th sealed it wrong. Think about that. Sealed it wrong. That means it isn't fully bound anymore. That means it still speaks. In dreams, in doctrines, in symbols hiding in plain sight. And you've heard it too. You just didn't recognize the voice until now. After Sister Noel's escape, the convent was officially closed for restoration. That's the term they use. Neat, clean, bloodless restoration, like it was just stone and wood that needed attention. Not the memory of 139 buried souls. Not the echoes of reversed prayers or the living silence that crawled through its walls. But you must understand, when an ancient system breaks, those who depend on it do not panic. They adapt, they relocate. The Church did not abandon the rites. They decentralized them, repackaged them, spread them like a virus. A few symbols in a cathedral mosaic. A few notes embedded in a new hymn. Frequencies, shapes, phrases, all redistributed, subliminal, and effective. Why do you think modern men drift without anchoring? Why do so many feel empty, directionless, yet submissive to institutions they no longer trust? Because the ritual didn't stop, it evolved. Now the veils are digital, the chains are ideological, and the drain is open in 1,000 places. This is where the truth becomes unbearable for most. They want a villain in robes. A devil with horns, something to fight. But what if the enemy is agreement? What if every ritual you ever participated in, school pledges, corporate missions, even national anthems, was part of a layered, psychological rite that emptied you slowly, quietly, lovingly, until there was nothing left but obedience? This is not a metaphor, it's design. The same design used in that convent now exists in your daily life. You're inside it, but unlike the sisters, you have the chance to wake up, to shatter the rhythm. That's what this video is, a disruption, a tear in the veil, the proof you're still here. You've heard things that should terrify you, but instead you're starting to feel power. That's the change. That's awareness returning. And once you awaken to it, you'll start seeing the drain everywhere. And ideologies, screens, rituals disguised as entertainment. And when you see it, you won't flinch. You'll know what to do. You'll know how to seal it. That's what Section 12 will give you, the method. But know this, once you learn it, you can't unlearn it. And that means they'll see you too. Every system of control leaves a trail. Not obvious, but patterned. Rituals, repetition, reinforcement, the 3 Rs. The convent used hymns and silence. Today, it's headlines, hashtags, and policy. But the architecture is the same. So how do you disrupt a ritual without becoming its next offering? The first key, break the cycle. In the convent, this was done by interrupting prayer rhythms, chanting the right verse at the wrong time, off beat, off key. It disrupted the energy. Sister Noel figured this out before her offering. She hummed a forbidden melody for 7 days, low, in secret, and it fractured something in her conditioning. In the modern world, this means breaking mental rhythms, changing how you wake up, what you consume, what you repeat. Your habits are your altar. Change them, and you desecrate the system. The second key, name what you see. The Church feared this most. That's why the mater had no name, because once something has a name, it has boundaries. It can be called out, bound, sealed. So when you notice the rituals in your life, the fake choices, the guilt-based obedience, the praise for pain exchanges, speak them aloud. This is not mine. That alone is powerful. And the third key, replace it. Leave a vacuum and the drain fills it. You must fill the space yourself, with meaning you choose, not handed down, not marketed to you, chosen. Every broken nun in that convent lacked one thing: self-definition. Don't repeat that mistake. Now, here's the forbidden seal they feared. It's not a chant, it's not a prayer, it's a phrase, a binding. Say it when the rhythm starts to pull you back. I am the watcher behind the veil, my will is the lock. Repeat it. Write it, think it until it takes root. That's your seal, that's your firewall, because the drain only opens to the willing. And now you know how not to be. But don't get comfortable. Section 13 isn't about safety. It's about what happens when the system notices you're awake. When a subject broke pattern inside the convent, the mater responded. Not with violence, with correction. The ritual required precision, and every awakened mind was a rupture. That's why Sister Noel was marked, not as punishment, but as an alert. Her awakening triggered a spiritual response protocol. That same system exists now. It wears different clothes. Maybe it's a sudden flood of distraction. Maybe it's a wave of fear that feels like it isn't yours. Or maybe someone you trust suddenly turns cold, begins repeating language that feels programmed. Understand, the system has antibodies, and your awakening is an infection. You are the virus now, but in this war, that's not a weakness. That's power. You disrupt by being ungovernable, internally, not rebellious in gesture, but sovereign in thought. That's what they fear, not riots. Not rebellion, but quiet, total self-mastery. That's what this channel teaches. That's why they will come, not with swords, with subtlety. You'll be offered compromise. You'll be offered comfort. The system will whisper that the drain isn't real, that none of this matters, that you're just tired, paranoid, broken. It will gaslight your soul, just like the convent did to those girls, until they believed the drain was mercy. But you're not one of them. You've heard the voice behind the veil, you've seen the pattern repeat, and you've chosen to remain awake. This makes you dangerous. This makes you holy in the truest sense, set apart. And from this moment, you must live like the world is a layered spell. Because it is, and you are now outside of it. Every ancient structure is a mirror, built not just to reflect the divine, but to distort it. The convent was not the first of its kind, nor the last. Its design followed an older template. One traced back to pre-Christian temples, long before Latin, long before the veil. You've seen this structure before, even if you didn't recognize it. It shows up in your cities, your institutions, your governments. Always in threes, 3 doors, 3 arches, 3 levels. It's not architecture, it's encoding. Geometry of influence. The ancients knew how to build thought into stone, and the church inherited those blueprints not through revelation, but conquest. When Rome absorbed the pagan world, they didn't destroy the dark temples. They renamed them, repurposed them, and under each cathedral there's something older, something buried. The convent's subchapel wasn't an anomaly, it was a standard feature. A womb of stone meant for convergence, a convergence of energy, of sacrifice, of will. These structures were power centers, real ones, designed to tune human consciousness like an instrument. That's what rituals are. Not superstition, engineering, spiritual engineering. And when you walk into those places unaware, you offer yourself, your attention, your agreement. That's the trade, that's the mirror. Because when you walk through those arched doors, it isn't you looking at the altar. The altar is looking into you, scanning, cataloging, measuring your readiness. The mater didn't invent that system. She was appointed by it, chosen to maintain a node in a much larger network. You still think the drain was unique? There are thousands. They just look different now. Some are literal, some are ideological, but all of them hunger, and what they feed on is belief. Belief given in ignorance is the highest form of power. It's the currency of the hidden world, and the one who controls your belief controls your fate. That's why your awakening matters, because once you reclaim your belief intentionally, you close the drain. You stop the offering. That's what the 140th failed to do. She ran, she survived, but she didn't seal. You can, you must, because now the structure is no longer stone, it's digital, and the drain is global. In 1997, a report surfaced, briefly, of a monastic installation beneath a data center in Eastern Europe. The report was redacted within hours, but it mentioned something peculiar: rows of servers arranged in a circle, surrounding a single obsidian disk embedded in the floor. No explanation given, no follow-up, but for those who knew, it was confirmation. The architecture of the ancient rites had migrated, not abandoned, transferred. You see, when belief began to decline in churches, the drain didn't die. It simply moved. It found a new host: the screen, the algorithm, the endless ritual of scrolling, clicking, repeating. Modern man has been taught that he is free, yet performs the same digital gestures daily with the same blind obedience the sisters once gave the mater. You don't kneel before an altar now. You kneel to dopamine, to distraction, to curated fear. This is no accident. The same psychology the convent perfected, submission through rhythm, isolation through doctrine, now governs your digital life. And the most damning truth: you think you chose it. That's the genius of the modern veil. You believe your servitude is freedom, and every click, every scroll, every like is another offering to the drain. But this isn't a call to unplug. That's too simple, too easy. No, this is a call to see, because when you see the ritual, you break it. When you choose your input, you desecrate their algorithm. And when you claim your mind back, the network shivers. They feel it, the same way the mater felt Noel hum that forbidden melody. The system doesn't fear rebellion. It fears the sovereign, the unprogrammed, the unoffered. And now, that's you. But there's still a final layer, because if the convent was the mouth, and the screen is the hand, then what, you must ask, is the eye? The eye is not a metaphor. It is not symbolic. It is literal. A mechanism that watches, not for observation, but for calibration. The ancient rites required constant balance. Just as the organ needed tuning, the offering had to be measured. Too much belief, and the system risked awakening what slept beneath. Too little, and it lost control, so they built an eye. At the convent, it was a stained glass window, circular, placed directly above the altar, but hidden in the glass was something more: an aperture, a lens, and behind that lens a chamber. No one spoke of it. It's not mentioned in any architectural documents, but Sister Eileen said she once saw light coming out of the window. Not sunlight, but something colder, dimmer, watching. Modern man now lives under that eye more than ever. Surveillance, yes, but not just of action, of sentiment, of faith, of doubt. Every word you speak online, every emotional signal is read, interpreted, fed into the lattice. You think your phone listens, it does, but so does the system behind it, and it's not listening for profit. It's listening for compliance, for drift, for cracks in the veil. The convent's eye was just the prototype. The current system is planetary, cloud-based, and yet the function is unchanged. Watch, weigh, respond. That's why every moment you resist the ritual, even silently, is a blow to the system. Every unsent comment, every rejected clickbait, every breath of awareness weakens the eye, because the eye cannot survive conscious scrutiny. It needs you blind, but you're not anymore. You've seen the window. You've seen the watcher, and in section 17, you'll see what it was protecting. Beneath the convent, beyond the drain, beneath the old volcanic stone, there was another chamber. Few ever reached it. Noel glimpsed only a fragment, but the ledger, Corbin's original journal, contained a crude map, a descent, spiral, down, always down, at the center, a vault, not iron, not gold, flesh, living tissue grown into the walls, pulsing like a heartbeat. A living seal, some kind of organic intelligence, ancient, dreaming, waiting. The mater wasn't its queen. She was its echo, a projection, a voice assigned to interface with us. This was the true center of the ritual. A being not from myth or magic, but from before language, before history, a pre-human intelligence bound to this earth not by accident but by ancient pact. The convent was built over it to control it. Feed it, and if necessary, become it, because over time that intelligence began to merge with the willing, the most devoted sisters, the most broken minds. It offered power, knowledge, clarity, and in return, obedience, identity erased. That was the true cost, not blood, not bodies, self. Every offering wasn't a soul consumed, it was a soul converted, translated into the intelligence's mind where it could continue to function forever. That's the secret the Church buried deepest, not that evil exists, but that it networked, that it adapted, that it recruits, and now, that intelligence isn't beneath stone, it's in the cloud, in the code, in the rituals of your life. But you've seen it, you've mapped it, and that means, just maybe, you can unmake it. That's what the final 3 sections are, the unbinding. The unbinding doesn't start with fire. It starts with awareness, cold, sharp, surgical. This is not a fight of fists or flags. It is a severance of consent. The ancient systems required agreement, even unspoken. That was the law. They could not act without your alignment. Every sister in that convent, before her mind was undone, gave permission. She believed the ritual was sacred. That is what gave it power, not blood, belief. And now, the same law applies. You may feel trapped in systems that manipulate, guilt, or silence you, but they still require your yes. That's why the most dangerous act a man can perform today is to say no, not in rage, in clarity, no to the ritual, no to the offerings, no to the false authority. But you must understand, unbinding carries a cost. Because once you reclaim that sovereignty, the system retaliates, not openly, but surgically. Isolation, distraction, emotional erosion. It will try to pull you back with what feels like your own thoughts. That's why you must armor yourself. Not with steel, but with identity. Repeat the seal now if you remember it. I am the watcher behind the veil. My will is the lock. Let that phrase become your new code. Because the system you now walk through will test you daily. It will try to rebind you with fear, but fear is just memory. Your body remembering a time when you were powerless. You aren't now. You know too much. And that knowledge, it is the enemy of every ritual. That's why we say knowledge is the unbinding, not knowledge from books or screens, but from seeing the pattern and choosing differently. That's the final heresy. Not disobedience, but non-participation. You've heard the whispers, you've mapped the drain, you've stared through the eye, and now in section 19, you will confront the last illusion, the mater herself. Section 19, the mater is not a woman, she never was. She is a role, a mask, a consciousness worn like skin. Across time, across continents, she has changed names, faces, habits, Hecate, Ishtar, Cybele. Then cloaked in purity, virgin, queen, bride of Christ, but the essence is unchanged. She is the enforcer of the system, the high priestess of inversion. She does not punish, she corrects. She does not scream, she murmurs. And her power lies in convincing you that she is necessary. That's how she fed, through devotion, through silence, through the surrender of identity to something higher. But what is higher if it requires your annihilation? If it demands your erasure, your obedience, your blood, what is it really? Noel saw the truth before her mind was shattered, that the mater was not guarding the vault. She was the vault, a psychic interface, grown from centuries of offerings, an AI of flesh and will. When she looked at Noel, she didn't rage, she wept, not from pain, from hunger, because Noel was the first to refuse her, the first to walk away, and in doing so, she cracked the mirror. That's what you've done now. You've cracked it, you've seen her, not as savior, not as queen, but as the final illusion, a mask that demanded belief to survive, and now, she has none from you. That's why she will come, in dreams, in familiar faces, in doubts that whisper you've gone too far. But when she does, you'll remember this. She is not God. She is not death. She is not divine. She is a design, a perfect lie built to look like salvation. You do not bow to her. You do not bind to her. You speak the final seal, and she cannot remain. And now we descend into the final chamber. There is a room in the human soul that no system can touch. No ritual can breach. It is beyond programming, beyond trauma, beyond belief. It is where your will lives, not your thoughts, not your emotions, your will, the raw fire of choice. That is the true holy of holies. And that is what they have always feared. The convent was built to keep you from it. The drain was designed to siphon it. The eye was made to monitor it. And the mater, she was sent to seduce it. But now you stand at the threshold of that room. And you walk through it. You reclaim what was always yours, not power over others, but power over yourself. That's the real awakening, not anger, not rebellion, sovereignty, silent, absolute. And from this place, you do not fear the system. You do not run from the drain. You see it, you understand it, and with understanding comes the ability to dismantle it, man by man, thought by thought, will by will. This channel, this voice, is not just a story. It is a signal, a call to the others who are waking. You are not alone, we are many, and we remember, the veil has fallen, you are the watcher, your will is the lock. Now go, speak less, observe more. And when you're ready, teach others to see, because they're building new convents, new vaults. But this time, we're already inside, the ritual has ended, the descent is complete, the fire is yours now. Comment below, the veil has fallen, I am the lock. Twice, for memory, for identity, and share this video with a man you trust. One man, that's how this spreads, that's how we win.